Welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Hal Blackwell, and today I'm going to talk about all of the books that I have read recently. I have read a lot of books, then I really haven't updated you guys at all about the books that I've been reading. So all of the books I'm going to talk about have been read between the halfway point of September and now. So basically about 3.5 weeks worth of reading that I'm going to be talking about today. And that actually tallies up to 12 books. So I'm going to try to go through these quickly, but I haven't talked about them in any other vlogs or anything like that because I've taken a few weeks off of vlogging. I had never really planned to do much vlogging on my channel, but there was a period of time where I was doing a few. And so I haven't really had an opportunity to talk about these books much with you, so I'm just going to go through them, but I will try to not take up forever. I'm just going to do these books chronologically from when I read them. That's how I'm just going to organize them. That's how I usually do my recent reads. So we're just going to go ahead and start with the book that I read 3.5 weeks ago. And that was Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. This is the first book in her original Mafia series. And I had a good time with this book. I gave it 3 stars. I had a lot of fun. I just don't feel like it's necessarily the series for me. When I do pick up a Mafia romance, I like them to be really, really dark. And while I think this is a wonderful Mafia romance for someone who has never read Mafia romance or dark romance before, and I also think it's a really fun ride, it's just not what I'm personally going to want to pick up if I'm in the mood for Mafia romance. I tend to want something a little bit grittier. Like I said, a fun ride, but not an all-time favorite. This is about an enemies to lovers Mafia romance story where we have our main female heroine who is the daughter of the head of the Italian Mafia in Chicago, and she is forced to marry the son of the Irish mob in Chicago, and they hate each other, they play pranks on each other, they really do anything that they can to just get under each other's skin. And it's definitely funny, and it is steamy at times as well. So if you're new to Mafia romance and you want to just kind of dip your toes in the water of a dark romance, I definitely recommend checking out Brutal Prince. The next book I read was a reread, and that was Sacrifice by Katie Robert. That's the first novella in this bind-up, The Court of the Vampire Queen by Katie Robert. And I was planning to just go ahead and go right through and read all of it, all 3 novellas that are in this bind-up, but I didn't get to it. So I finished the first novella, and I am planning on picking up the second and third novella in this series soon, just basically finishing up this bind-up. And upon reread, I give it 4 stars because you're basically just rereading smut, and the storyline in this series is not super strong, which is really fun for a first go around, but for the second, it just wasn't as entertaining to me. But I am looking forward to learning what happens next for our characters. This is about a girl who is basically a half vampire, and she's sold by her dad to basically be a blood bank for this really strong older vampire. And it ends up being a reverse harem vampire romance. I can't really tell you much more because it is a novella. And basically anything you know past the first little bit is kind of a spoiler. So I really enjoyed it. The first time I read this, I gave it 5 stars. Second time, I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was an ARC, and that was B.A. Paris's The Prisoner. This was actually one of my most anticipated reads of this year, and it was a giant disappointment. I gave this book 1 star. This is about a woman who ends up being held captive, taken captive, and forced in this dark room where she has cannot see anything, and she's a prisoner there. But somehow this experience of being a prisoner is preferable to our main character than her marriage, where she basically also was a prisoner. The actual synopsis, the idea behind the story was so intriguing to me. I was really interested in what this meant, what would happen. I love hostage stories. And this was, I don't know how B.A. Paris managed to make a hostage story so boring, but it was so boring. This was just not a good book, in my opinion. It just did not work for me. There was not enough intrigue. There was not enough atmosphere. And then to boot, I probably would have given it 2 stars. But at the end, you get the villain monologue that lasts freaking forever. And it's just like a question and answer between the main character and the person. And it's like, oh, but what about this? Oh, what about this? And it's just like the constant like answering of the questions as an explanation of like how everything happened. It was just so lazily done. The whole book, I felt like maybe she was on a deadline and was forced to write a book or something. I don't know, but that's what it felt like. And it just felt like she just was in a race to get it done, and just the wrap up was just freaking awful. Super lazy writing. I did not enjoy it. Definitely don't recommend, no matter how cool the synopsis sounds. The next book that I read was much more enjoyable, and that was The Highwayman by Kerrigan Byrne. This is a dark historical romance. It's the first in a series in which like each book is its own romance with an HEA. So it follows a different couple with each book. This one follows our main character starting when she's a little girl being fostered, and she meets this boy and he's being mistreated. Then basically something happens to her that he helps her and saves her. And then we flash forward to our main character when she's like 27, 28, and she's a self-proclaimed widow, and she works at the courthouse or the jail, something like that, like in administration. And the police arrest a highwayman, like the most notorious highwayman, but he basically quickly escapes and takes her captive with him. And this is a romance between our main character and the highwayman that takes her captive. And I absolutely adored this book. Make sure to check trigger warnings before you pick it up. Just like any romance I tend to recommend will probably have trigger warnings, so just always check them. This book was really, really sweet, very dark. Both of our main characters experience a lot of trauma that they're dealing with, and it was a beautiful love story. I loved it. I cannot wait to read more from Kerrigan Byrne. So I'm not sure if I already said, but I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to pick up more by her. The next book I picked up was the 3rd book in a series, and that was Mila Fanelli's Mafia, Madman. The first book in the series is Mafia Mistress, and the first 2 books in the series are their own duology with one couple, and it concludes basically at the end of the 2nd book with their HEA. So this book was actually a different couple. I can't really talk about like who it is because I feel like that's like spoiling a little bit. I don't know. But basically this is a mafia romance, captor-captive, age gap, with a lot of really dark themes and CNC and like dubious consent. And I absolutely adored it. I have given every book in this series 5 stars. Just absolutely chef's kiss. This is how you write a mafia romance. But just so you know, the heroes in this series are not all that likable, I should say. And so just keep that in mind. I feel like the hero in this book was a little bit more apologetic than Fausto. So there was that, but he's pretty cray as well. So definitely enjoyed, 5 stars. Cannot wait for the 4th book in the series to come out. The next book I read was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This is about a girl who sees an ad asking for a nanny. She basically gets interviewed and she gets to the house, and it's a smart house, but really a beautiful, like gothic kind of looking stone mini mansion. But it's also a smart house, and she is to be watching these girls. And things just kind of go awry. This is a thriller slash, not a horror, but kind of like more on the horror side of thriller. It's definitely spooky, definitely scary. It has a lot of gothic themes, gothic writing, and I really, really, really enjoyed this. We read this for my book club, my local book club here in North Carolina, and I believe everyone enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and this was actually my first Ruth Ware, so I'm definitely looking forward to picking up more from her in the future. Next, I picked up Dragon Age by M.L. Spencer. This is a chonker. This is a indie fantasy. It's a self-published fantasy written by a female. So this was actually the first book for my book club, Femmes, Afictionados, which I host with Maria Might Read That and Kay's Hidden Shelf. I'll have them linked down below. And we had our first live show with our guest host, Covers with Cassidy, and we had a ton of fun. I'm going to link the live show down below. It was so cool to see everyone's individual thoughts about this book. There was a lot of things we both agreed and disagreed on. And it was interesting how that played out. So I definitely encourage you to go check out that video, and you can see more of everyone's thoughts on the book, because there was a lot of, like, everyone had different ratings. And yeah, I gave this book 4 stars. I cannot wait to see more from M.L. Spencer. I see where her writing needs some improvement in certain aspects, certain plot holes, and conveniences with the magic system, but at the same time, I absolutely adored this. I gave it 4 stars on enjoyment. I really enjoyed it. It was a classic fantasy about a boy who is the chosen one, and he also is autistic, but they don't really call it that in this world. And there are dragons and dragon riders, and there's a magic school, and it's just an awesome epic fantasy. And I think that she is currently writing or coming out with the next book in the series soon. I think originally it was going to be a standalone, possibly, but so you do get a lot of wrap up with this, but I can see where the series can continue on as well. Really, really, really enjoyed this. Can't wait to read more from M.L. Spencer. So now we're getting into October books. So I am taking part in a few different readathons this month. And the first book in October that I read was A Spell for Trouble by Esme Addison. I read this for Black Aweenathon. That's hosted by Bree. I'll have her channel and the announcement for Black Aweenathon listed down below in the description. So you can follow that link and learn about Black Aweenathon. You are, I'm sure, more than welcome to start participating halfway through the month. But yeah, this was a cozy mystery about witches, and it's like, I love cozy, witchy, cozy mysteries, and I thought this was really cute, and it takes place in North Carolina. We have our main character who is going to visit her aunts who she hasn't seen in a long time, and her cousins in this little seaside town in North Carolina, and they all work at this apothecary, and she discovers she's a witch, and there's obviously and then her aunt is framed for murder, and chaos ensues from there. It's really cute, and I'm looking forward to continuing on in the series. I think that there's already 2 books in the series, and I think a 3rd one is coming out. But this one was really, really cute, and I had a lot of fun. Next, I had my first 5-star of October, and that was The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This was like 6-star quality, like the highest tier of 5-star for me. This was such an amazing read. Definitely check your trigger warnings before picking this book up. This is a thriller that is about a sex cult. So we have this girl who basically, she finds out that her college friend has killed herself, and she decides to go back to her college to find out what happened. And it's like 10 years after she graduated. And she gets there, she ends up working with this podcast host who was a childhood friend of hers, and they start looking into what might have happened to her friend, and she ends up diving into her past when she was part of this sex cult, and things get really dark really fast. There's some pretty horrific things that happen in this book, and I think this book had some amazingly important things to say, a lot of important things to say social commentary wise about gender expectations, about rape, about the Me Too movement, about a lot of things. I think this book just had a lot to say, and it touched me. It made me cry. I couldn't pick up a book for 2 days after I read it, and that doesn't happen very often, but it just really affected me. It's definitely going to be one of my most favorite books of the year. Definitely, I would say in my top 5. I really adored this book. It's definitely a hard thing to read though, so make sure you're in the right mind space to read it, because it can easily throw you into depression or throw you into a reading slump, and it's very dark. So just recommend with warnings. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Bratva's Heir by Jane Henry and Sophie Lark. So this is my second Sophie Lark in this wrap up, and I had never read her before. I liked this book more than I liked Brutal Prince. It was darker and it had more of the steam themes that I enjoy more. And I really liked this. I really liked it. This book is about a member of the Bratva, and he is in prison and he gets this new therapist, and that is our heroine. And her father is the DA, and she doesn't get along with her parents, and she's doing something that she knows that they wouldn't agree with, which is working at the prison. And she starts seeing our Bratva heir, and he ends up escaping from prison, taking her captive in the process, and their romance ensues from there. This is super steamy. There's BDSM elements along with like daddy dom elements as well. And it was just a fun ride too. It had that Sophie Lark fun element with it, but just a little bit darker. And I really appreciated that. Super taboo, super dark, just super fun. And I would love to read more from this author duo, and it makes me more inclined to try more Sophie Lark in the future because I did enjoy this so much. I give this 4 stars, and I would say like it's up about like a 4 on the Steam scale as well. I was reading this book while filming the dark romance recommendations video that I filmed in collaboration with Kaylee's Books, and the whole time I was like, oh, I wish I could mention this because I was really enjoying it, but I didn't want to recommend it if I hadn't finished it yet. But the next book I read was also a 4-star read, and that was My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I had already read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires last year, and I think I gave that 5 stars. I loved that one. This one I just didn't connect with quite as much, maybe because I'm so far past that stage. The friendship elements really did resonate with me. I thought they were really cute, but at the same time, I don't know. I didn't fully connect with the goofiness, and the actual horror elements I did not feel to be that dark. It definitely wasn't as dark, in my opinion, as the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. This felt more like a thriller than a horror to me. And while it was fun, I was going into it for a horror, so I was a little bit disappointed by that. But I definitely do recommend, because it had that Grady Hendrix flair where it was really touching, but then would be funny. So it just kind of goes back between like horror, a touching moment, funny, horror, serious, funny. Like he runs the whole spectrum in his books, and that's why I really like them. And it was definitely really goofy often, especially with like the title chapters being like 80s songs and just a lot of like the 80s references and the funny high school antics. And yeah, so all of that was really fun, and also it was touching. But I did wish that it was a little bit more horrific. I don't want to forget that I did also read this for Halloween Weekend Readathon, and I'll link all that information down below for the readathon. The last book that I have read recently was Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Niskata. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That's a hard name to say. C.M. Niskata. I wish that they would update the cover for this like they did for the audiobook, in vain with like the second and third book in the series too, but they still haven't changed this awful cover. But I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. This is about a girl who takes a job at a milking farm. The town where this milking farm is has all different like magical creatures. There's fairies and vampires and orcs and all sorts. And so she takes this job at a milking farm where they milk centaurs, and they centaur males. So I mean, obviously you can imagine probably what they're milking, and they're using that to make human Viagra. And so it's this commodity ingredient, and this milking farm offers amazing benefits and really great pay, and she has all kinds of loans right now from getting out of college, and she can't find a good job, basically experiencing what many millennials experienced getting out of college, which was just this really huge difficulty of like starter positions not being what they were. And so she takes this job, and there she meets a minotaur, and they start a romance from there. Despite this cover, this book was really, really cute. I thought this was so sweet. It was very steamy. It had a really good balance between cute and steam, and I just think that the author did a wonderful job with this concept. And yeah, I can't wait to continue on in this series. This is definitely like a new favorite for me in the monster romance category. So I would say like it's like a 4.5. I'm gonna say it's like a 4.5. I really, really, really enjoyed this book, and I'm looking forward to reading more from her. Okay, so that's all. That's all of the 12 books that I have read between like halfway through September and now. And I've read a lot of really good stuff, only a few disappointments, and I am looking forward to continuing on in my October readathons. So if you liked this video, please click the like button. Let me know down below if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, or if you haven't, let me know what you are currently reading right now. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps it grow. You can click the notification bell to be notified every time I post new videos. Down below in the description will be my Goodreads, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, so you can follow me on all of those social media platforms if you so choose. Until next time, fellow readers, keep reading and living your best life. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue